Hello, GOAT Format Duelists. These are the deck lists from 2025 GOAT Format Worlds. I felt it was really important to talk about this because, needless to say, I think the results are a bit unexpected. The headline here is that Panda Burn was first place, second place, and fourth place here. So 3 out of the top 4 decks were Panda Burn. And the reason why that I want to talk about this, I'm going to talk about like the big picture here. I like talking about the big picture. Yes, we could talk about like some of the individual choices, like, oh, why is this guy playing Solemn Judgment and the other guy's playing Magic Jammer? I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. What I do want to spend a lot of time on, though, is how the GOAT format meta fundamentally works. Now, I've decided like a long time ago that I'm not ever going to do like a tier list video for GOAT format, even though it would get a lot of views. And the reason why is because of stuff like this. Now, if you were to like look at these results, if you just handed these results to someone who didn't really know a lot about GOAT format, say, what do you think like the top tier decks are? They'd be like, oh, obviously Panda Burn is the best deck. And I don't think that is like true in a vacuum. I think Panda Burn was obviously a very good deck for this tournament, but the fact that it just won Worlds means that like now is probably the worst time ever to play it. GOAT format, I will get comments from people saying like, oh, GOAT format's not diverse, whatever. GOAT format is very diverse in terms of the number of truly viable decks, and I think more so than Edison format. I know a lot of people say, no, you're wrong. But the gap in GOAT format between what is tier 1 and what is tier 2 is like so small that I think you could reasonably say there are like 10 decks that are basically tier 1. And this is kind of an example of that. So why did Panda Burn do so well in this tournament? And I believe this is like the second Worlds that Panda Burn has won. Well, fundamentally, Panda Burn is sort of an alt-win combo deck. It seeks to reach a victory through a different means than most other decks. And it does so in a way, for this tournament, most people weren't prepared for it. So, like, if we look at this Chaos deck here, for example, we look at the side, what do we have for Burn? Okay, just 2 Mystic Walks, and that's it. That is not enough. Sorry, guys. I know I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but 2 Mystic Walks is not enough to have a favorable matchup versus Burn. It's just not. And, if we look at the side here, there is just nothing really for combo decks. Like, what do you have for Reasoning Gate? I don't know, 2 Scapegoats, I guess? What do you have for Library FTK? Nothing. What do you have for, the Stein decks? Is there like a Karibo here? No, there's not. So what makes a deck like Panda Burn good, or really any other sort of combo deck in GOAT format, is that, hey, it's a strong deck that other people aren't respecting. If people do decide to respect Burn, like if we just see every deck that's citing like, I don't know, 3 Mystic Walks and 2 Mobius, Burn isn't good anymore. And I know some people will just kind of have the attitude of, oh, well, I'm never going to play Burn then because I don't want to take the risk that people have too many cards in their side deck for me. And that's fine, but like me personally, I'm more of like a metagamer. If I had entered this tournament, I would have played Library FTK. And the reason why is that, like Panda Burn, it is a very strong combo deck that people just aren't respecting. They're not citing anything for it. And the other reason, something that I mentioned back on the stream last week, because people were asking me like, oh, what are good decks to play for Worlds? In any sort of like invitation-only tournament, we had 87 players, but these are the best 87 players in GOAT format. And the strategies that you want to use against the best GOAT format players are not necessarily the same as the strategies that you maybe want to like use at locals where there's a lot of people that are new to the format. So if I'm going up against all these top players like Anthony Alvarado, Lucas, Alafia, Ghost Rider, AJT, BLS, all these people, I don't want to be like playing the same kind of game that they are. I don't want to be playing like a fair game of GOAT format where we're both trying to do the same thing. The way that I want to beat a better player is by playing a strategy that is unfair and that they are not prepared for, right? I don't know, how often I'm going to beat Anthony Alvarado in Chaos Mirrors, but I know that if I play Library FTK, I've got a decent shot. I know that if I play Panda Burn, I've got a decent shot. I know that if I play Reasoning Gate, I've got a decent shot. So for me, it's like, that is kind of the whole sales pitch of playing combo and alt win in GOAT format. And I think, honestly, like if you're a long-term GOAT format player, these players, Kotsos and Chopper, I don't know, like, are these people that always play Panda Burn and they just happen to take the right deck to the right event? Or are these the kinds of players who were saying to themselves, well, I've got, 5 different GOAT format decks that I'm really good with, and I'm picking Panda Burn because I think it's the best meta call today. I like to be the metagaming guy. I like to have lots of different decks that I'm competent with and then take the one that people aren't prepared for. And that is often combo decks. We see, though, that like Warriors did very well too. I've always been the kind of guy who has been saying, hey, I think Chaos Turbo is overrated. I said that after it won Worlds last year. I said it after it won Worlds the year before that. I thought it was overrated. Now, does that mean it's bad? Does that mean it's not tier 1? No, it's just a lot of people think that, oh, this deck is like unbeatable, right? I hear people say Chaos Turbo is tier 0, which if you play GOAT format at all is just such an absurd take. There are lots of decks that have a favorable matchup against Chaos Turbo. And we actually see the 2 main decks in this top 8, 3 Warrior decks, 3 Panda Burn decks. So honestly, it's like I wouldn't have necessarily predicted this exact top 8, but at the same time, it does not surprise me. This top 8 makes perfect sense. What do we have? 2 Chaos decks and 6 decks that are built to beat Chaos. That is the GOAT format meta right now. Will that always be the GOAT format meta? I don't know, but it's the meta right now. And again, this is why I don't like to make tier lists, because I feel like what's viable can change so quickly, and it's so meta dependent. Like if I make a tier list saying, oh, these are the 3 best decks, they might not be like the 3 best decks for you in your meta in the tournaments that you are playing. And, GOAT format, I know it's not perfect. I know people have their complaints, but for me, that is one of the things that I really like about GOAT format is the metagaming aspect. I think that is more present in GOAT format than it has been in most formats throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's history. In most formats, they're just, the 2 or 3 or 4 best decks, and that's just kind of it. Like in Edison, honestly, I know I hate to hate on Edison, but I just think that Edison format has realistically 2 good strategies. Strategies that involve Black Wings and strategies that involve Substitute. And there is some metagaming there to some extent. Like you can play cards like Royal Oppression, which are really good versus Substitute. And then you can maybe, I don't know, play something like Starlight Road, which is really good versus Icarus Attack. But in all of the formats that I've played in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, GOAT format is probably the one that has sort of the most RPS-like metagaming type strategies. Now, I will talk a bit about the representation in this tournament because I think it's kind of interesting. Chaos Turbo was, 32 decks. 32 out of 87 is, I don't know, 30, what percent is that? Okay, that's 37%, which is pretty reasonable. I think a little lower than people were expecting. I know in previous worlds, we had Chaos decks taking up maybe 40 to 50%. And again, I know some people that just think that Chaos Turbo is only the real option. And honestly, my advice, for someone who's maybe not knowing what direction they want to go in GOAT format, if you really like this deck, you want to play one of these 2 decks, go ahead, play it. I mean, it's fine. It's a viable deck. But don't let people talk you into this idea that oh, it's just the only viable deck for any tournament at all. It's really not. I will say though, the other Chaos Turbo player, he had a little more cited for burn. He had a Mobius and 2 Dust Tornadoes plus the 3rd Raigeki break. That's not bad. I think you could go a little more though. And I think some of these Chaos decks need to just have more for the alt win matchups in general. We got stuff I don't know, Dark Possessed Soul and Tsukiyomi, presumably for GOAT control. I don't think you need stuff like that. I think you could replace that with maybe another Mobius, Jowgen the Spiritualist, Karibo, something like that. Because we've seen time and time again that if people do not respect these alt win decks, it's mostly Cyberstein, Burn, Reasoning 8 to some extent, they're just going to do really well. I think they, on paper, all of these alt-win decks that I just named have a very good matchup against Chaos Turbo. And if they lose, it's because they just got unlucky. And some people hate that, right? Some people just hate playing like a Reasoning Gate deck and going, oh, I lost because I activated Reasoning and my opponent always called the right level. Yeah, that can be frustrating. But at the end of the day, it's all about, W's and L's, right? How many wins are you getting? Doesn't matter how you're getting them. So yeah, I think this is a very interesting result. We can look a little at the first place deck because I know you guys are going to want me to look at the deck somewhat. And the other thing too that's interesting is realize that for this tournament, Panda Burn was the third most popular deck. That I did not expect. And that's kind of interesting when you think about it, because all of these players got together and said, hey, well, maybe not together, but they independently decided we're all going to play Panda Burn. It's going to be the third most popular deck. And somehow they were able to kind of keep that a secret from other players to where they weren't really siding for Burn. In an IRL tournament, I think that might be harder to pull off because people walk around the room and see what other people are playing and adjust their side deck accordingly. But that is what happened here. But you'll see this player had a Panda Burn mirror in finals, had barrel behind the door for the mirror match. That basically, magic cylinder for effect damage, essentially, right? Oh no, I'm not going to take the damage you are. So that actually seems like a really, really sick card for the mirror. And I mean, depending on how the metagame develops, what we could maybe see is Rescue Cat decks that have Death Wombat in the main to counter Burn. That's a thing. I mean, everything else is standard-ish. I think maybe one of the great debates among Burn players is do you play Chain Energy or not? We see the second place deck has 3 Chain Energy, and then the first place deck has no Chain Energy. I think another debate, to be honest, is just how many pandas are you going to play? The first place list has not only 3 pandas, but 3 giant rats as well. That is so much panda access. That is just, I'm going to have a panda all the time whenever I need it. I don't know if the card is quite that good, to be honest. I mean, me personally, it's I've been tinkering around with Burn, but I've been wanting to play fewer pandas. I think, the Ojama Trio just desserts. That is kind of the biggest sort of staple combo that Burn decks have. I also think Nightmare Wheel is just actually a disgusting card, a super, super underrated card, one of the best cards in Burn. A lot of the other stuff fairly standard. But it's if you cut some of these pandas, well, then you can also cut the giant Trunades, and then maybe you can just play more Burn cards instead. I think there is merit to that. I think you can definitely take it in that direction. The Warrior decks, we got 3 Warrior decks that's worth talking about. All pretty standard as well. What actually surprises me a little is actually how little Jar of Greed there was in this top 8. If we look at the Chaos decks, one had 0 Jar of Greeds, and then the other had 1 Jar of Greed. And then with the Warrior decks, 2 out of the 3 Warrior decks were not playing any Jar of Greeds. Now, I mean, as someone who's more of a GOAT format spectator than a player, I mean, I like that because I think Jar of Greed is kind of a boring card. The game gets pretty boring if everyone just runs 2 Upstarts and 3 Jar of Greeds. But at the same time, I think in Warriors, Jar of Greed is probably better than something like Book of Moon, right? Book of Moon, it's fine in a Warrior deck, but it's a little situational. I think it's better than even this Xing Zhen Hu here, if we pull this up. So it's me, if I'm playing Warriors, I'm probably going to play a list pretty similar to this, except I'm going to cut a Book of Moon, a Xing Zhen Hu, and 1 Kaiku for 3 Jar of Greed and call it a day. But, if you don't want to, that's fine also, I suppose. But, Warrior deck was fairly standard. Again, though, we see very little anti-burn stuff on the side. We've got Mobius, which is definitely an anti-burn card. We've got, I don't know, I guess you could say Jar of Greed is kind of anti-burn. It depends. We've got the 3rd Dust Tornado on the side along with 2 in the main. So, Warriors, I think, you can have a reasonable burn matchup. But what's so sick about these Panda decks is, you've just got 3 giant rats to search out your double kinetic soldier. So, I don't know. It's like kind of crazy, but like if you're playing warriors against burn, I almost feel like you have to keep the Sakuretsus in just to kill like the kinetic soldiers and maybe even the pandas. It's warriors can be in an awkward spot. Let's look at this other warrior list here. See what he was citing. I mean, here we've got like one Mystic Walk, one Dust Tornado, one Zing Zinhu. Not too bad. With Jargreeds, kind of one of the upsides of Jargreeds is post-side you can draw into your side deck cards a little faster because you got the Jargreeds to, dig you that extra 1% through your deck. Everything else on the side looks pretty standard. I hope what happens, to be honest, is that we see more development in the GOAT format meta. Because I think, I don't know, you could argue, some of this is subjective, but you could argue that like the last couple of months have been a little stale. It seemed like the whole meta was just sort of going towards Jargreen, Upstart, Dust Shoot, Slop. And, I think this is shaking up the meta a little. I think this proves that the meta is still pretty open. And I think people maybe it's just the nature of how people talk online, but they often speak in like absolutes. Like, oh, this deck is good and nothing could ever happen that would make it bad. This deck is bad and it can never be good. I think honestly, if I'm telling someone, they say, hey, I'm picking up like GOAT format, what are sort of like the list of viable decks that I can play that have the potential to win a tournament? I think you got the control decks. You got like Chaos Turbo, Chaos Control, GOAT Control. You've got aggro, which is mainly warriors, let's be honest here. Then you've kind of got like the mid-range decks. Like you've got the Chaos Return deck. You got the Reaper deck that I played on stream last week. You've got like the Stein hybrid decks. And then you've got like all the combo decks, which is basically like Reasoning Gate, Burn, and Rescue Cat, and Library FTK. Like I think all of those are reasonably viable. And I think if you're a competitive GOAT format player, I think what this tournament shows is you do need to kind of like adjust. You can't be lazy. You can't just go, oh, I'm going to play the exact same main and the exact same side for every single tournament. Because just the reality of like how diverse the format really is that you're not going to be able to cover all your bases, right? Like some people just have the idea of, oh, there's some deck. People used to think it was GOAT control. Now people say the same about Chaos, where it's like, oh, this is tier 0. My main and my side is going to be able to cover every matchup, and I'm going to be able to beat everything. That's not true. You're going to have to pick and choose. I hate to say it, but that's just how it is. Some people don't like that. I think it makes the game more interesting, though. If you look at a deck like this, this top 8 deck, we see that like this deck had a lot of stuff for the mirror, right? 3 Dust Shoots in the main with 2 Mind Controls in the side. And then you got like some stuff for aggro, like you got Goat's meta for aggro. You've got, I don't know, like 1 Saku for aggro. But like it's mostly just built to beat the mirror. And I think that is often a mistake. When a metagame gets to a point where like the most popular deck is just being built to beat itself, that means one of 2 things. Either like that deck is just tier 0 or it's very open to being exploited. And in GOAT format, I think it's the latter. I don't think there will ever be a tier 0 deck in GOAT format. And I hope not. I don't think there will be, and I hope there won't be. Again, I know the format's not perfect. I know people will like find ways to complain about this. Some people like use this as evidence. Oh, GOAT format is bad. 3 out of the top 4 decks were burn. Who would want to play a format where 3 out of the top 4 decks are burn? And, the answer to me is that's kind of oversimplifying it. It's not that 3 out of the top 4 decks were burn like just forever. They were for this one tournament. So burn, it's a deck that, you can be a burn specialist. I know there are some people that just play burn for every tournament. But I think what you want to do is have decks like burn in your back pocket for, tournaments that are hard, like Worlds, and for tournaments where you think people are getting lazy and not respecting you enough, which clearly this tournament was an example of that. So, guys, let me know what you think. Were you surprised by these top deck lists? Do you think this is good news for the future of GOAT format? Do we like the fact that, it's not just this tournament, but if we've looked at the past few tournaments, the Chaos decks have not been putting up the numbers that they used to. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I guess it depends on what they're being replaced with. Maybe you want to see less Chaos Turbo in the top of tournaments, but you don't want to see burn either. Let me know, guys. Thanks for watching.